My mother looked at me this morning and said, "Why do you have a golf shirt on?" I said, "You'll find out." Do you guys ever look at your social media, or maybe you do this, and you try to come up with that perfect picture? I look at some of the people that I went to high school with 25 years ago, and I'm like, is that real? Or I start comparing them in my mind and go, man, they're doing really well. Pictures of their house, their cars, their beautiful children, their beautiful wife. You're like, man, they must really, really, really have it together. How many of you have Facebook? I think some of you are probably going, I'm not going to raise my hand because I don't trust what he's going to do. How many of you really think all those people that you have listed as friends are really friends? Some of them might just be acquaintances. I get a kick out of getting friend requests from people that I've met at the hospital, that I've taken care of as patients. Creepy. I met you in the hospital. I don't think I want to be your friend. So you can follow me all around and see my great life. And I think a lot of what goes on Facebook is not true. Is there some good aspects to it? Yes. But I think we always put our best foot forward. We want everybody to see how great a day we had. Do you ever post when you have a bad day? Picture of you looks like you've just been crying. Fought with my teenage daughter. Wife mad at me. Post. We don't do that. We don't do that. You have an awful meal at home that you think is going to be great. And you look at it and you're like, we're not cooking that again. You don't take a picture of that and post it to Facebook saying, great meal. No. That stuff out there, probably more than half of it's not even real. Which brings me to what I'm talking about today. What is friendship really about? When we talked about doing the life of David, I right away volunteered to do Jonathan and David. And then somehow, and this is upcoming, I got stuck, I think, with David and Bathsheba. So I told Farrah this morning I have like two opposite extremes. I've got the friendship with Jonathan and David, and then I've got one of David's major problems with Bathsheba. So look forward to that one. But here this morning, talking about friendships, we can look at David and Jonathan and see some just nuggets of information we can take and say, I can make my friendships better, or I can be a true friend. Not this fake stuff that we see out on Facebook that you can doctor up and make it look good, but to just be a real person and a real friend to somebody else. I don't feel like I had real friends until I was probably up into my 20s. I think as a kid, I had acquaintances. I had people I hung out with, but I didn't understand what true friendship was until I went off to Bible college. And I was finally around some guys that were struggling with the same things as me. We could talk about it. We could share. But I think our culture has forced us to be this way because we've been raised in such a way that we try to do everything ourselves. And if you can't do it yourself, what do we think you are? In our minds, we think we're weak or that we can't do it. Or why are we even around? And then we kind of spiral into this depressive state because we have been convinced that we're our own person and we can make it on our own. Having friendships growing up wasn't cool. Why would I want to hang out with another guy? Why would I want to bare my soul to somebody else? Why would I want to do that? Now, I finally realized, like I said in my 20s, that friendships are important and they need to be there. If we go all the way back to Genesis, do you remember when God gave Adam the task to name the animals? And as they went by, were they in just one animal at a time, or how many animals went by him at a time? Thank you. Come on. It's not a hard question. Won't give you any hard questions. 2 at a time went by. And it was during that time that God realized and Adam realized it wasn't good to be by yourself. And then you go through the story of how he created Eve. And then we see how the two of them had a relationship, but a friendship. I think it's not just about male and female there. I think it's also about just having people that you can be yourself with and around. And real, true friendship. One of the wonderful things I get to do working at Licking Memorial is go over to Shepherd Hill. And over at Shepherd Hill is where we have folks that are struggling with mental health and chemical dependency. So while I'm over there a couple times a week, I not only get to be with the patients, but I get to learn cool stuff about myself. And one of the things that I came across, and I want to share it with you guys this morning, is this idea of a window. It's called the Johari window. Some of you may have heard about this before. But imagine a window with the old panes. There's 4 of them, okay? And in each of those panes is something about you. We have this first pane that in our life we let everybody see. You know, all the great stuff about us. All the stuff that we don't really mind if people know who our spouse is and our kids and our work and where we live and just the general stuff about you. So in my pane, there would be the idea that I like to run. I like the Ohio State Buckeyes. My wife's name is Farah. We have 2 teenage daughters. All that stuff you don't care if other people know. That's the pane where you throw the stuff that you're excited about. Hey, I want people to know this about me, and that's the things they learn. Then there's another pane. It's the pane that you don't let people see. It's the dark secrets, the stuff that you don't want to share with people, the stuff that you try to hide and you put in the closet, and you don't ever open the closet. So all that stuff stays here. Then there's the pane down here that is more of the unconscious stuff, the stuff that's about you that maybe you don't recognize, you don't see, it's your unconscious state. Then there's this other pane down here. That's the pane that other people see that you don't see. Now, this one's tough to deal with because you have to take constructive criticism. You have to take the ideas and the feedback that people might give you about you, which is hard to do, right? I don't like being told what I've done wrong. I don't like being told that maybe there's a spot, Cory, that you're not seeing this situation right, or you're falling short, or you're struggling here. So you have these 4 pains. And I think this pain down here is the one that our friends really help us with when it truly comes down to true, real friendship. So I want you to keep that pain in mind, and we're going to come back to it at the end. So there's the things that others see that you don't. So let's get in this story of Jonathan and David. So we talked about David a little bit last week. We described him being anointed as the next king. So let's go back and do some history before we get into the story for today. So Israel had come up out of Egypt years ago, and God had sent them some leaders. And what he would do as Israel had struggles, he would raise up somebody, and they were called judges. Those judges would lead for a short period of time. They'd get Israel back to where they needed to be, and they would kind of step out, or God would remove them from the situation, and Israel would continue a little bit longer. And then what would happen? Israel would spiral downward into sin. He'd have to send another judge. Well, while this is going on, Israel looks at all these nations around them, and they all have kings. So Israel starts whining. Samuel is the last judge. They're whining to Samuel. They're whining to God. We want a king. And God's like, no, that's not how this is set up. We're going to keep doing, and then finally he gives into them because they whine enough. You ever have that kid? The kid that realizes that if you whine enough, the parents will give in. That's what Israel does. They whine so much that they finally give in, so he appoints Saul as king. Now, we talked a little bit about Saul last week. Saul had the physical stature. He looked like a king. He looked like a good guy. He was a little bit taller than everybody else. He would be in what we would consider some of the magazines of the day. He looked like a king. But he didn't live up to the expectations. And he was frustrating God, and God finally got to a point where we picked up last week, where he sent Samuel to anoint David. And remember, Jason gave that background about the fact that Jesse had these 6 boys and then this other boy, and there was, I'm not going to go into it again, but there's a weird relationship that this last boy came from, who ended up being David, the next king. So he's anointed. That was in chapter 16. Chapter 17, the chapter before 18 was where I'm going to be today in 1 Samuel. Chapter 17 is a very familiar story. David goes out and fights a giant named Goliath. We have this picture of this little kid with a sling. He picks up stones, wings him around, knocks the guy in the head, down he goes. So we have this picture now of this young kid that has been anointed as king. He comes into Saul's court and serves Saul for a little bit. So there's this jealousy that starts happening, and we're going to see that as we go through these stories in the next few weeks. But all of a sudden, Saul's son Jonathan befriends this guy named David. In 1 Samuel 18, the first few verses, David had just come back to report to Saul about what happened with Goliath. By the time David had finished reporting it to Saul, Jonathan was deeply impressed with David. An immediate bond was forged between them. He became totally committed to David. From that point on, he would be David's number one advocate and friend. Saul received David into his household that day, no more to return to the home of his father. Jonathan, out of his deep love for David, made a covenant with him. He formalized it with solemn gifts, his own royal robe and weapons, armor, sword, bow, and belt. Whatever Saul gave David to do, he did it, and he did it well. So well that Saul put him in charge of his military operations. Everybody, both the people in general and Saul's servants, approved and admired David's leadership. So here you have the current king, you have the king-to-be coming into the house, and you have the current king's son Jonathan befriending David. So chapter 19 is something different. Chapter 20 goes into this real weird plan because they have realized that David has realized that Saul wants to kill him. Makes sense, doesn't it? I don't want somebody to take my kingship, so I'm going to get rid of the guy. Well, Jonathan steps up and walks alongside David and says, I will protect you. I will find out what my dad's going to do. I will step up. So you have this really weird friendship forming because it's the king's son becoming friends with the next king. I don't want to read the whole chapter because it's really long, and it's this weird story about going out into the wilderness and firing these arrows as a code, and the code finally David realizes during the code that Saul wants to kill him, and Jonathan's going to do everything to save him. So I'm going to read the end of that chapter. Jonathan stood up to his father. Why would you want him dead? What's he done? Saul throws his spear at Jonathan to kill him. That convinced Jonathan that his father was fixated on killing David. Really? I hope my father never throws a spear at me or pulls a gun at me at the table. I mean, this is a big deal. Scared to death. So what does Jonathan do? In the morning, Jonathan went to the field for the appointment with David. They had already arranged all this. He had his young servant with him, and he told the servant, run and get the arrows I'm about to shoot. The boy started running, and Jonathan shot an arrow way beyond him. As the boy came to the area where the arrow had been shot, Jonathan yelled out, isn't the arrow farther out? He yelled again, hurry, quickly, don't just stand there. Jonathan's servant then picked up the arrow and brought it to his master. The boy, of course, knew nothing of what was going on. Only Jonathan and David knew. Jonathan gave his quiver and bow to the boy and sent him back to town. After the servant was gone, David got up from his hiding place beside the boulder and then fell on his face to the ground, 3 times prostrating himself. And then they kissed one another and wept, friend over friend, David weeping especially hard. Jonathan said, go in peace. The 2 of us have vowed friendship in God's name, saying, God will be the bond between me and you, and between my children and your children forever. Jonathan steps out, goes against his dad, and protects David. Their friendship, their bond is so powerful that he knew he needed to do that, and he could do that. He also knew that God would protect their relationship. So with that in mind, this morning I want us to talk about some things that we could do in friendships to be like Jonathan and David. I've come to a realization in my own life that friendship makes life doable. You know, there are times that we're going to face stuff that we don't like. There's going to be hard times in life. And I've learned if you keep it inside, it's very unhealthy. You got to get it out. You got to talk to somebody. No, this can be awkward for some of us that don't want to talk. We don't want to go in that bottom pane of that window and share something with somebody that we think they need to know. Or that we ourselves want to pull something from out of here in that other pane that we know the dark secrets and share that stuff with somebody. Because then we feel like we're being weak. God didn't create us to be by ourselves. He wants us to have friendships. He wants us to be like David and Jonathan. He wants us to find joy in other people. Now, I know not everybody in this room likes big crowds, but I would think you'd at least like people. You don't have to like all people. I don't like all people. Just being honest. I love everybody because the Bible says I have to. Are you guys awake today? I got one laugh. There was supposed to be some laughter with that. Think about it. Do we like everybody? No. Do we love everybody? We're supposed to. If we're following Jesus, that's what we're supposed to be doing. So as friends, we need to have that great joy. And here's some keys to having authentic relationships. And we see these in the life of Jonathan and David. The first one, be aware. Be aware of what's going on around you and who you are with. I have had a couple of my friends call me in the last 3 or 4 years in tears. Absolute tears. Guys that I never dreamed in my mind would ever think about crying. But on the other end of the phone, they're sobbing. And they're like, Cory, I just need to talk to somebody. I had no clue with the two of them that something was going on. Step back sometimes. Look at your life. Look at the life around you. Be aware of the people that are in your life and try to figure out what's going on in their lives. Maybe they need you as a friend right now. Be aware. Jonathan was like that with David. He listened to this guy give this report about what had happened on the battlefield, and right away, something made him think, this is a guy I want to spend time with. Be aware. The second one, be intentional. Some friendships just happen. Other ones we have to put work into and be intentional on. Now, some of you might be that mindset in here that you feel like everybody else should reach out to you. The street goes both ways. We both people in a relationship, both people in a friendship should be reaching out. We have to be intentional in spending time with people and being around them. There's a guy that I've become real close friends with just because of running with him. I know you guys are probably tired of me talking about running. My next running injury coming. It's always around the corner. But it goes all the way back to when Morgan was in 3rd grade. She's now an 11th grader. So 8 years ago, I met this guy, and he asked me, he said, hey, what do you do in your life? And we started talking, and somehow it came up that I used to run. He goes, well, I'm part of this running group at the Y, and why don't you come hang out with us? Oh, okay. What time? 5:10 in the morning. What? Say that again? Did you say morning? He goes, yeah, we meet at the parking lot. We take off at 5:15 from the YMCA. And I said, it's dark. Where do you go? Well, we try to stay on streets with lights, but sometimes we venture off, and there's all kinds of bike paths in town, and there it goes. It's a good time, you'll have fun. So I took him up on his offer. 8 years later, I'm still venturing there early in the morning. I run with him and 2 other guys and 5 or 6 ladies, and what we joke about what is talked about on the run stays on the run. But all of us are involved in the people business. We're all around people all day long. So we have one that's a therapist. We have one that's a social worker. We have one that is an occupational therapist, a bailiff, myself. a guy that works in and out of factories. But we all are around people. So sometimes you just need to get it out there. When I've been injured, you know what I miss the most? It's not the running. It's being with my people, my friends. Being intentional, putting myself in that group. You need to be intentional in your friendships and put yourself out there. Another one is be available. Be available. Allow yourself to have friends. Are they always going to work out? No. Are you going to be around everybody and enjoy it? No. But put yourself out there and be available. I have had some friendships that I never would have imagined would have come about if I hadn't made myself available. I had a weird one with a 78 now? 78-year-old woman. Crazy little thing. You all know her. Name was Kay. She moved to South Carolina and abandoned us all. I became friends with Kay because her husband went through cancer. Didn't make it, and our friendship lasted past that. Who would have thought that I'd be able to talk to a 77-year-old woman? Nothing against you ladies that are close to that in here. But to be able to have a friendship and be available. I put myself out there when she needed to talk, and then it worked the other way around. I've got another friend right now that has gone through some hard times, and you might see us some days just walking around the hospital outside. He just needs somebody to talk to. Our schedules don't always work out, but I can shoot him a text, say, hey, you want to meet before work and go for a mile walk? Make yourself available to each other. Be honest. Be honest. This one's the hard one. I'm seeing in my mind David and Jonathan having some real heart-to-heart conversations about Saul. And the scriptures, some of the interpretations say that David loved Jonathan more than anything else on this world. Now, a lot of people have taken that and tried to make it something else that I don't think it was. But they had such a close relationship, such a close friendship. It was about being honest with each other. The first time that I really felt that this hit me was with a friend in Bible college. And we weren't sure if our college was going to make it another semester. That's how rough things had gotten. We were sitting trying to figure out where were we going to go to finish our education. We were getting ready to be seniors. We'd put all this work in. We didn't want to give it up, but we had to figure out something. The two of us sitting in tears, trying to decide what on earth is God doing? Why would he bring us to this college and then things fall apart? Be honest with each other. I've spoken before in the past about some of the rough spots Farrah and I have gone through. If you look at it, if we would just been honest with each other and communicated, life would have been much better. And now sometimes we might be too honest with each other. Just blurt out what we're thinking. But it's working. To have a true relationship, a true friendship, you have to be honest. I remember a few years ago when I started officiating track and cross country, which Dad also does as well. I told Dad, because we hadn't been around each other a lot other than, like Thanksgiving, Christmas, family get-togethers. I said, Dad, you might not like being around me. I was just honest with him. Sometimes I blurt things out that shouldn't come out. Sometimes I use profanity. Sometimes I make fun of people. I was just honest with him. I don't know if you'll like working with me or hanging out with me. He's put up with me so far. The last one, which I think is the most important, is to be forgiving. I go back to what I was making fun of on Facebook, this idea that these people have these perfect lives. Look at your friendships and your relationships and realize that not everybody's perfect. And that sometimes people are going to make mistakes. And then step back and realize, you know what? I've been forgiven. By God, I should be able to forgive other people. One of the hardest things in friendships is you're going to have disagreements. You're going to have struggles. You're going to have fights even. You're not always going to get along. But the truest of friendships, you'll be able to forgive the other person. And you'll be able to move on in life and still have that friendship. I get kind of jealous sometimes when I see people that have had friendships since they were like little kids. Like people that went to school together and then they graduated high school together and they're 70 years old and they're still talking on the phone and hanging out and knowing each other and what's going on. And then I realized I have one of those in my house every day. The little girl that I met when she was probably 12 years old. Got to dance with at a junior high dance when she was dressed up like a witch. Who knew that we'd be stuck together? But it hasn't gone forward without some forgiveness here and there. We need to learn to forgive each other just like Christ forgives us. Jeff, my boss, we did some training in Columbus. And one of the instructors had both of us at different times. So I was going through the training. She wanted to talk to us on the phone. And we were talking about having problems in relationships and not always getting along. And she wanted to know what times he and I didn't get along. And so we're trying to make up something. Because we've always gotten along. We've always forgiven each other. We've not had this big fight where you don't get along. And she didn't believe us. So then we're like, do we have to make up something? And then it happened. It happened one night. I had worked a track meet and he was on call for me, taking my spot. He'd been called in 3 times that night since we left at 4:30. So it's now 9 o'clock and I get a phone call and Jeff says, "Are you home yet?" Yeah. I was supposed to go on call at 10. "Yeah, I'm home." He goes, "Are you ready to go on call?" Yeah. "Why?" He goes, I can't do this. I can't ever do this. I'm done. I can't do this. I'm like, "Jeff, what's going on?" He goes, "I got called in 3 times. I can't do this anymore." "I'm sorry. And I'll try to make it better." He goes, "I don't know about you doing these track meets anymore." So that sent me spiraling out of control because that's one of the things I love to do, and I can't do track meets. I already have all these track meets on the schedule. What am I going to do? I can't replace myself. And let's just say the next morning in the office wasn't as pretty as it usually is. We had to talk our way through that. We had to forgive each other. We had to figure out a better system. Now he still lets me do track meets. We still get along. We still have a good friendship. I'm not saying that you have these close relationships with everybody you cross paths with. What I'm saying is you have to have people like Jonathan in your life. If you're a David, and we all are, by the time we get to the end of this series, all of us are going to look at David's life and go, "Yep, I messed up there, I messed up there, I messed up." God took David's life, and it is a beautiful story to the point where he says over and over again, David is a man after my own heart. But he messed up, and he had forgiveness. I want to give you some scriptures to help you in your friendships. They're up here. The first one, Proverbs 18:24. "Friends come and friends go, but a true friend sticks by you like family." Now, sometimes we read that and it's hard to interpret because some of our families aren't the greatest of, right? But these are the people in your life, Proverbs says this, that are there no matter what. They're going to stick by you. You have a bad time in your life, they're still there. You make a horrible mistake, they're still there. They still love you. They know what forgiveness is all about. So that's a good one to cling on to. The next one, Romans 12:10. "Be good friends who love deeply. Practice playing second fiddle." True friends are willing to step back and just listen and see when you have the need and be there for you. Can you be a true friend? Can you play second fiddle? Sometimes it's hard to be second. But to be a real friend, that's what we have to do. Number 3, Galatians 5:13. It's absolutely clear that God has called you to a free life. Just make sure you don't use this freedom as an excuse to do whatever you want to do and destroy your freedom. Rather, use your freedom to serve one another in love. That's how freedom grows. For everything we know about God's word is summed up in a single sentence: love others as you love yourself. Basically, we need to love other people like we love ourselves. No, my traditional training tells me to love God first and then others, then myself. But Scripture clearly says I have to love myself before I love others. Jesus even said it in Matthew 23. So do you love yourself? It's a lot easier to be a friend if you love yourself. So another scripture to think about. One more. Not John 3:16, 1 John 3:16. This is how we've come to understand and experience love. Christ sacrificed his life for us. This is why we ought to live sacrificially for our fellow believers and not just be out for ourselves. I go back to telling you at the beginning that God saw Adam and saw that he needed somebody. He realized that you can't do this alone. We have to realize that too. And we have to be there for each other, sacrificing our own life to help others, to be around others, and to love others. If you think about it, Jesus had friends. Band, if you want to come on up. Jesus had friends. He chose these 12 guys, uneducated, bottom of the pile as to what they could do for life. Picked them up. As Jason has taught us, they were probably fairly young. Trained them to be close to him and to help him and follow him. And then out of that 12, he had this smaller group of 3. Peter, James, and John. I feel like Peter, James, and John's stories often come out in the Gospels. Peter wrote a couple letters on his own. John is talked about and wrote books a lot. James, not so much. But that group of 3 guys was Jesus' closest group of friends. It was to him that he went in the end. To them that he went in the end. It really, really makes me smile when I think about what Peter did. And he was given the ability to write 1st and 2nd Peter. He turned his back on Jesus when he was a young man, but as an old man, he drew on that. And he left these letters for us to glean from what it takes to follow Jesus. What it takes to be around people. He drew from that friendship. Do you want to be a true friend? Do you want to love those people around you? I feel like the Lord has blessed us all with people in our lives. As I said, some of them are easy to like, some of them are not. But he's asked us to love them all. I want you to stand with me right now. And as the band plays, I just want you to think about your friends, the ones that are close to you. The people that you love and the people that love you. Are you being the best friend you possibly can be? Are you being like David and Jonathan and loving each other no matter what? Supporting each other no matter what? If you're not, there's not a better time to make a change. To change the direction you're going in and support those friends that are around you and love them than right now. Let's contemplate that as we sing.